Funny how, from time to time, event or circumstances remind me that, despite my best efforts, I'm still somehow very much trapped in a visionary reality that is linear, and in a timeline where there is an expectation that things and events will follow a logical succession. Oh my God, reality. And guess what? Before I start rambling, yes, this is Davide, the impertinent collector, when I'll take you down with me the journey of the object that made my collection, but also my personal journey, who might be of some interest, as there is no one without the other. And you know, you would somehow excuse my slightly more psychedelic attire than usual, but this is a very special episode. The year is 1992. Location is Yucatan in the south of Mexico. Traveling party, my parents, myself, my sister and my brother-in-law. A rather brainy but down-to-earth Italian physicist that my sister had married 1 year prior, and that with whom she had moved to Chicago on a big project the day after the wedding. And so, Mexico, the south of Mexico, Yucatan, let me tell you, it's been like a fantastic holiday. Truly, we were all together and we saw many of the archaeological sites of the Mayans. We were able to climb some of the pyramids, including the one of Chichen Itza. I was also able to go inside. There is a tunnel. I was able to climb the inside, something that if you're suffering from claustrophobia, is not really your thing. And you know, personally, I felt like there were just a couple of us with 3 or 4 guys to say like, oh, now here they're gonna perform some sort of a ritual, and I'm gonna be my skull smashed on the stone with some ritual stones there, because that's what they were doing at the time. They love human sacrifices. And so we visited some other islands. We went a little bit everywhere. We went in the center of Yucatan to the town of Merida that was called the Mercado de Mexico, a colonial style city that has been established by the Spanish conquistadores. So, such a great holiday. We even managed to rent one of these American massive 4-wheel drive, and we drove it all by ourselves for a few hours as we were aiming to reach a very remote fisherman village. And in fact, we did, through 3 hours on an unsealed road. And I remember that at some point we had the sea on one side, and then there was a lagoon. And at some point the lagoon, through a little river, was starting to join the open sea. And there was the most unstable bridge that we have to cross, made of sort of rotten wood. And you know what? We all saw that it would be too dangerous to cross the bridge all together. So the 4 of us all got out of the car and we let what I call Professor Double M, my brother-in-law, cross the bridge with the jeep. somehow we also thought that the last member of the family was also the most dispensable. A sentiment that somehow I feel my sister is still sharing to these days. But what happened is that wise Professor Double M had safely brought the vehicle on the other side of the bridge. The four of us were starting walking this tiny little bridge and looking at the sea, looking at the lagoon, and this Panama hat that my dad had bought the previous night in a fancy restaurant for $150 flew off, and it ended up on the edge of this little river on the side of this bank. We all looked down, and of course there was no question that the hat was irretrievable. But not for my mum, who probably was the one who had forked the $150 the previous night, who decided to go and recover the precious Panama hat. And she went down, and we saw her sort of like slowly disappear in this thick vegetation that we were 100% sure was infested with poisonous snakes, spiders, and possible alligators. But there she was, and when she reached and fetched the hat, everybody was roaring in enthusiasm. And you know, we never really clarified if the cheers was for the bravery of my mum, for the recovery of the precious Panama hat, or if we were hoping that the wild beast hiding in the vegetation could snatch her in a matter of seconds. It didn't happen. She's still with us. But that was the scene. And the other funny things that happened is that when my mom got back and my dad happily was able to put on his Panama hat, she told us that she had seen face to face a big cat. Let me tell you, we all start bursting into laughter. And even if my mom really had no reputation of making up stories, we saw that the idea that she found some sort of like wild beast there was the most unrealistic claim. Until we find ourselves in this remote village. And whilst we were eating the pescado, the freshly fished seafood, and each one of us had a lobster, and we were drinking coconut, the fisherman turned cook for the unlikely tourist who managed to reach that faraway outpost of civilization, told us and warned us not to leave the vehicle on the way back, because just few days before, a wild Mexican jaguar had been spotted in the vicinity. Now I can still feel the chill down the spine, and so the same was for everybody else. But the poor cook could not understand, whilst my mother was shouting at us, "I told you so, I told you so. You should always listen to me." Yes, Mom, like we can do otherwise. Anyway, the holiday really was fantastic. But that's where the plot becomes quite interesting. Prior to that extraordinary holiday in Yucatan, and let me tell you something, I don't want to sound too pedantic, especially whilst I'm dressed up like a bozo, but back then, traveling still had a sense of adventure, some sort of mystique. The world wasn't as polarized as it is today. September 11 hadn't happened. And even the mass tourism that is so common these days, even faraway location, was nowhere to be seen. So keep that in mind. But as for myself, that wasn't the first time that I'd been exposed to the civilization of America, pre-conquistadores. And that because a tutor by the name of Donatella, Donny, I still love you after all these years, wherever you are, I hope you're seeing me now, she had managed to smuggle a book by an anthropologist. And, this anthropologist was no other than a guy called Carlos Castaneda. But you also need to understand this to put things in context. In the 1970, 1980, 1990, I would say across Europe, certainly in Spain, Portugal and France and in Italy, that have quite a uniform educational system, we had this straight line of history. So everything was started with the Sumerian and the Assyrian Babylonians, with the cuneiform tables. Then you had ancient Egypt with the pharaohs and the pyramids. Then you had ancient Greece with the classical building and the fabulous philosophers, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. Then you had the Roman Empire with Julius Caesar, Augustus, Hadrian and the Hadrian Wall, the expansion of the empire. Then you had the fall of the empire with the barbarians coming from the east. And then we had the Middle Ages. And then we had the Medici with the Renaissance. And after that we jump to the French Revolution, the American War of Independence, the American Civil War. And then, boom, you find yourself in World War I. And that's where, you got the Communist Revolution in Russia. And then you had Mussolini and Hitler, so the Nazi fascism taking over Europe. And then you had, World War II. And look, I don't want to say that this is a very narrow vision of history, because in those 5,000 years, there is so much to read, so much to learn, so much to discover. It's really extraordinary time and fascination. But back in those days, 1970, 1980, 1990s, the mainstream culture was not focusing on any other big and large and successful civilization like India, like China, like Japan, and like the Mesoamerican with the Maya and the Aztec. So, to me, the fact that I had exposure to this book was something of a watershed moment. Because in this book, the author describes his experience in the company of a shaman. And the shaman had a way to explore the worlds that are all around us, but they are not accessible to the normal people. And as I dig deeper, I discovered this wonderful new cosmology. Gone were Adam and Eve and the apple and the serpent and the Garden of Eden and God who kicked them out. Gone were hell, purgatory and Eden or paradise, like described by Dante in the Divine Comedy. Gone was Jesus, the crucifixion, the resurrection, and all the saints that came after him, St. Peter, St. Paul, St. Jerome, St. Augustine, St. Anthony, St. Francis. Poof! All gone. Because in the cosmologies of some of this culture in the Mesoamerica, they had a reality based on 9 overlapping worlds. And these worlds were all extraordinary to me. You had the world of flowers. You had the world of enchantment. You had the world of dreams, the world of wilderness, the world at night, the world of the corn cob, the world of the mountains, the world and the sea, and the world in outer space. And the shaman had a pivotal role in preserving these worlds and protecting them. But through a particular ritual, he also had the means and the ability to travel across these interconnected worlds and see the future, see the past, gather answers for people with deep questions. But part of this ritual required the use of one particular toxic psychedelic agent that was extracted from these rare small bulbs called the peyote. My God, when I discovered this mystical world where people were using the peyote to explore other worlds and were very much the individuals free from this sense of guilt, from this sense of destiny, from this sense of the apocalypse. I was impending upon us, and it still is to these days, according to the media. Oh, here you have not a less dramatic vision of reality, but one where the individual was very much at the center. And you can ask yourself, are you in the dreamy world today? Are you in the night world today? Are you in the flower worlds today? Where are you? How can you cross these worlds? Now, as for the holiday in Mexico, we flew back to Chicago. And that's where, like, the couple of souvenirs that I had collected as a mementos of that fantastic holiday starting to cause problem. Because I bought a large spherical obsidian bowl. And when I went through security at the airport, the Americans saw that I had a bomb. I said, like, listen guys, this is not 1871 when you throw the bomb, that is round like this. That was the commotion. And the other commotion I added many years later, because I also bought a wooden sculpture of a shaman made with local woods and like copying one of the frieze that you had on the pyramids. And that also caused problem when I got to Australia, because you are not allowed to import like seeds or wood or fruit. They have the strictest biosecurity laws in the world to protect their own flora, their own fauna. To the point that, once as I drove from Sydney to Adelaide, when I was on the border with Western Australia, I got stopped by a patrol of this like police force never seen before. And I've been interrogated and I've been asked very seriously if in my boot I was carrying strawberries or bananas. I say like, listen guys, I've been driving for 3,000 kilometers. Do you really think that I have bananas or strawberries in my boot? So, keep all this in mind and imagine my shock, my surprise, and my disbelief when, whilst looking for like exotic plants from the balcony of my new apartment in Sydney, I came across this company specialized in rare specimen. And among the specimen, they had no other than the mystical peyote. Really, in a country when it's illegal to move from state to state with strawberries and bananas in a bag, you allow this? Yes, you are allowed to own a live peyote is for botanical purposes. And here it is. This is the peyote that I got less than 12 months ago. And then he completed this journey that started not in 1992, where I went to Mexico, but in 1983, when I read this book. And in this book, what is extraordinary is that as the shaman is explaining what's happening and how it works, he tells to the author that he cannot possibly experience the ritual. He could not be introduced to the actual ritual unless he found his home peyote. And he sent him to a 2 days journey in the wilderness looking for the peyote, because the philosophy is that you don't find the peyote finds you. And so it happened that this peyote found me, and I'm gonna smuggle it no matter what, wherever I am around the world. And you create some sort of a bond, because the peyote is the bridge to the 9 words that have all the answer to all your questions. But the peyote flowers very rarely, and it grows extremely slowly, and so is in fact a protected species, and for obvious reason is hunted down in Texas, California, Arizona, and also in large part of Mexico for its psychedelic properties. And so, you know, I cannot possibly machine and produce the mixer that would unlock those 9 words. But at the same time, that creates a bond with a living form. And that in itself is something that I do not take for granted. And neither should you if you like my videos. So you know what to do. Like, comment, and subscribe. Do you know that my peyote, once every 2 weeks, it requires 24 milliliters, 24 grams if you prefer, of spring water? And when I remember, I have a timer on my calendar, I make sure that I serve him Evian water from France, sometimes aqua panna, a touch of sophistication from this plant from this cactus that holds the secret of the 9 worlds, and he could help me to fetch the answer I'm so much desperate to gain. And this is Davide from the Impertinent Collector with his peyote.